Hey everybody, this is Post-Production Pie with SLRlounge.com. Welcome to another constructive critique. Hope you guys had a great weekend and are preparing for a awesomely fantabulous Turkey Day. I know we are, and I actually have a new recipe this year that I'm excited to try out, so we'll see how it goes with my turkey. Let's get started, guys. We are going to be critiquing images that have been submitted to the constructive critique section of the SLR Lounge forum. So to get there, simply go to SLRlounge.com, click on forums. Once my slow connection loads it, I will go to constructive critique, and then this is where you want to first read the constructive critique rules before participating, and then just go to town, guys, because it's all free and it's the best way to learn and grow with your fellow photography peers. Let's get right started, guys. I have everything loaded up this time into different tabs so that we can quickly go through it and just save a bit of time. We're going to start first with this Vineyard Portrait by Anthony. Now, Anthony says that this is his first attempt with the, or he was attempting the Brennizer method with this shot. I think he did a great job. So the Brennizer method is basically where you're taking, say, a 50mm lens or something that's anything other than a wide-angle lens, but something that has a shallow depth of field. You're shooting, say, 20-30 shots in this one scene with the focal point locked, and then you're creating a panorama. And the whole point of it is to create an extremely shallow depth of field that would be impossible with any basically available lens. So it's equivalent to, say, shooting a 25mm lens with a 0.5 aperture, which doesn't actually exist, and that's why the technique is used. Now for this shot in particular, I'd say that the depth of field isn't so shallow where I think of Brennizer method. I kind of think that this was just shot on like a standard 24mm 1.4 lens at 1.4. That's kind of what it looks like, which isn't really a problem. It still looks beautiful and it's a great shot, but I'm just saying that it doesn't really look like a super shallow depth of field, which is typically why you want to do this method, because this method is very cumbersome to actually go through and shoot and then to produce. So I'd say you might be better off if you can afford. If you're going for this type of look, you might be better off just with a 24 1.4 glass. If you can't afford that, or if you don't have that lens, then yeah, Brennizer method is your next best option. Overall, I really dig the shot, and let's talk about kind of some critique as far as the shot itself. And this is a lot of this. I'm going to tell you guys when things are more preferential, when it's more my opinion, versus when it's more kind of subjective. And this is really more, or I'm sorry, when it's more objective, not subjective. This is more subjective, so this is more preferential. If I were shooting this exact same scene, what I would probably do is shoot it centered. What we have here is a left line and a right line that are kind of off kilter a little bit, so they're off center a little bit. I would place the camera right in the middle of this line. I'd shoot it from the exact same height. I think your height was perfect, but if we shot at dead center, then we'd have these beautiful left and right leading lines going straight into the center of the frame where your subject or where you are standing. I'm not sure if this is you or your subject, but either way. So that's kind of one subjective thing that I would change. Now from a post-production standpoint, I think you did an incredible job with the coloring, the lighting. It all looks beautiful. From a shooting standpoint, I think you did a great job there as well. The one thing I would say is that I'm not sure as far as the subject goes what his relationship is to the field. If he is the farmer or the owner of the field, I might try and get him like in a position of more kind of action where he's maybe doing something with the field. As it is right now, it kind of looks like he's just passing by. You're on vacation and you're just standing in front of a field and you're like, what's up, dude? This is a vineyard and I'm here in front of it and this is going to my slideshow for this vacation. So it's kind of that look, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that kind of has that look with the pose. It's a very nice dominant pose though. Let's go on to the next image. So here we have from Igor. He's relatively new to photography. This is a portrait that he took. He's about 1 year into it now, and I think you're doing a great job, Igor. This is a really nice shot. Looks like you have two light sources, and based on what the background looks like, it looks somewhat like your sun is actually coming from the left, which is creating your kind of rim light on the left side. You've got, it looks like a main light with some sort of modifier on the right side that's creating a nice soft light on your face, which is great. Your main light looks awesome. The overall lighting, I think you've done a really great job with. It's very well balanced with the background, and it's solid as far as that goes. All right, so let's start from the top. Now, as far as composition goes, I think there's one thing that I might change. I love your placement of this kind of trail going off in the back. That's great. The only thing I would change is I would either choose one or the other. And this is really kind of more, in my opinion, it's more of an objective standpoint as far as either crop in tight so we have strictly a headshot where you're cropping kind of right across the forehead of the beanie, or go a little bit wider where we can basically see your entire shoulder and see the top of your head and with a little bit of room between that and the frame. Right now I kind of feel like it's at this in-between spot. Now that's kind of my idea what I would do in that situation. It's really up to you, but that's kind of what I would say to do in this kind of scene. You do have a little bit of grain here, but it's nice grain. Someone mentioned that it's grainy, but I always like to classify if it's good grain and it looks like film grain, which is basically uniform and consistent looking grain, small, it's fine, it looks nice. I keep that kind of grain and I love that look. When it's non-uniform grain, when I have banding, when I have color grain or color noise issues, that's when I want to eliminate that type of stuff. So I think it looks great just how it is. As far as the post-production side goes, the one thing that I would change is just that we have a few areas of high contrast dots basically. In these areas where we have a lot of strong color and then you have a white fleck, it becomes a little bit of a distraction because it creates a lot of contrast. So with these, it's probably just little dust particles, but I would just go and just basically clone these out, or if you're using Lightroom, go use your spot removal tool to get those out. Post-production, other than that, you did a great job. Everything looks good. I like the color. I like the cool look to it. It has a very nice kind of wintry feel to it, and I dig it. Let's go on to the next image. We have Alone at the Beach. And by the way, guys, the reason why Igor and Anthony are getting such nice quality images on the forum is because they're loading it to Flickr and then embedding into the forum. Our forum does a horrendous job of basically posting your images, and so I wouldn't recommend posting them as attachments. Simply load them to Flickr, embed the image in here. Here we have an image that's actually linked as opposed to embedded, which I'd recommend always embedding so we can see it just right here and we don't have to click to Flickr. But here it is on Flickr. We have this Alone at the Beach. This was taken by Sujith, and this is a really nice shot. As far as the story that it tells, I love it. It's a great idea from a story standpoint. From a shooting standpoint, I might change a few things. Now, generally, this is really kind of a rule of composition, is that you typically want to leave the frame open where the subject is looking or where they're moving towards. It's kind of an action or a looking type rule, where if we have a subject here that's looking towards the left of the frame, we want to frame that subject towards the right of the frame, so that way the left of the frame is open and our eye will naturally go towards what he's looking at, okay? So what I would do in this scene is basically move the frame all the way to his right side, so basically we can see him and then him staring into the ocean with these great kind of ominous storm clouds. In this scene particularly, I would also say, like, I think I get what you're going for with these footsteps that are kind of leading up to him. But generally, like, the way that type of shot works well is if you go out into the water more where there's no footsteps at all, and then you have him step over that area, then you shoot low and use the footsteps to lead into him. Right here, it's kind of in a really busy area. It looks like a high traffic area that has a lot of footsteps, and they kind of just get lost. It ends up just looking busy, kind of like just a busy foreground or background. Again, what I would do as far as the composition goes is frame over to the left side. So basically, we're going to push this right frame all the way over. If we're going to use a foreground with footprints, then frame that in. But if not, I would push the bottom of the frame up as well. So we basically see 1/3 him and the ocean, 2/3 of this awesome sky cloud detail. I really don't think you'd be losing much if you lost this entire right side of the image, because there's not much there. Last thing, as far as the crop goes, I would just make sure that you crop straight for the ocean, because the ocean's tilting in a little bit. Other than that, I dig the processing. I think you did a great job on the processing side. The black and white effect works really well. Really works with the overall mood, so good job there. Let's go on to our next image. This is by Drekket, and this is how crappy our images look when we load them to the forum, because it does a really bad job. I'm sure Drekket's image looks much better than this in real life, but not on our SLR Lounge forum. We're working to address this, by the way, which will get taken care of. So really cool shot here. A nighttime scene. Looks like you dragged your shutter a bit. Looks like you also dropped your aperture down quite a bit, because you have a nice starburst effect on all the lights. There's a couple things I'd recommend for this scene. Number one is I would go and pick up, if you do this kind of type of photography a lot, go and pick up a neutral density filter. You can get, like, say, a 0.9 or a 1. I think it's a, 1.5. These are 3 and 5. They come in all sorts of different stops. Basically, you can cut down the light by, say, 3 stops or 5 stops or even up to 10 stops. You cut down the amount of light, which lets you drag the shutter out longer. Now, what this is going to do for you is you're probably at, like, what looks like around a 2 to 5 second shutter duration. And what happens is you're seeing still some of the detail on the water, because the water's moving and it's gotten blurry, but it hasn't gotten completely glassy yet. So you're still picking up some of that detail in the movement. Now, if you went to, say, a 20, 30, or even a 1 minute long exposure, 20, 30 second, by the way, not 20, 30 minutes, or a 1 minute long exposure, this water is going to become basically completely smooth, and it creates a really nice reflection surface for the city, basically. So you get a much nicer quality reflection off of it. So that's kind of what it'll do for you. As far as it'll also actually, if there's cars in the scene, you'll be dragging so long that the cars will basically disappear except for the light trails that they leave. So it's a really nice effect for that type of stuff. The other thing I'd recommend for this type of photography, for nighttime photography, is really trying to shoot a little bit earlier when you have a tiny bit of color still left in the sky, because we have basically this pitch black line up here, which it basically doesn't create any contrast or difference between where the buildings stop versus where the sky starts. So what I'd recommend is shooting like, say, half hour to an hour after sunset is dark enough where the city lights are popping, and you can still get these kind of long shutter drags with low apertures and using your ND filter, but you'll have some color in the sky, which is going to create some nice detail and contrast against the buildings. So that's one recommendation there. Let's check out your after. So here's the process version. You asked if it's too much, and I do think it is a little bit too much. For my taste, I'm kind of really going more for the natural look. This looks a little bit oversaturated, a little over contrasty. But this is kind of a preferential thing. If this is the way that you like and this is your style, then that's totally fine. It's kind of not my style, but I do dig the crop that you put. I love wide crops, wide format crops, and I think it works really, really well for this scene and scenes like this in particular. So I dig that. I think you're better off though with this original look, just maybe a little bit more contrast, trying lifting out the shadows where possible, and that's basically it. All right, let's move on to the next image. So we have Modernistic Architectural Photography by Jan Erik Edvardsen. And this isn't Jan's first post. Jan's actually a really great photographer, and this is an awesome image. Now, I'll be honest, the first time I saw this image, I thought to myself, Jan, you've posted here before. You know the rules, one image at a time. And then I was like, oh wait, this is one image. And I was like, holy crap, this is one image. That's awesome, mind blown. It's a really nice shot. And this is a perfect example of a great fine art architectural image that offers so much in terms of composition. We have on the left side of this frame, so there's so many rules here that are being followed, and there's so many great things of this. I'll point them out here. So basically we have essentially the right 1/3 of the frame, or close to that, as this blue sky with this the end of the building kind of tapering off into the edge. This taper creates a nice little triangle. So we see a beautiful triangle here, which is really adds a lot of interest in the frame. We have great shapes over here on the wall. Over here on the right side, we have this blue sky with great detail in the clouds. And it's actually a complementary color to this kind of yellowish look over here on the left. It works very, very well in contrast with each other. On the left side, we have this beautiful shadow pattern with a completely different pattern and color than with the right side. So all in all, we have this image that just works incredibly well together as a piece of fine art architectural photography. It's a really great job as far as your vision, as far as the way that you shot it, compositionally, processing was great. It just all works. And this is something I could see hung up on a canvas in a museum somewhere. So really great job on this one, Jen. Great post. Let's go on to our next one. This is from Clickmaker. Longtime viewer, first time poster. That's not the title of this image. That's just his comment. So that's great. Glad to have you. As far as your shot goes, I love the overall colors. Now, as far as the composition and what you're shooting, at first when I saw this, I actually thought it was a real person, and I realized it's actually a statue, which is totally fine. I'm just saying that in this kind of situation, what I would really try and do is work your way into a different position. Now, this type of shot with a silhouette, basically where we have this nice highlight edge from the sun, it works best when it's shot against a bright background. So basically, if the entire subject was against the sky, it would be a much, much stronger image. Right now, you have this building behind the person, which really detracts from his overall kind of silhouette and the overall look in the image. So if you can, find a position or find an angle. Maybe you're shooting bottom up more. Maybe you're using the horse's body to block out more of that building, and try and find a different way. Now, if there's no other way to shoot it, then that's just the way it was. But that would lead to a much stronger image if you had him against just the sky with kind of some nice detail against the foreground. Overall, as far as processing, I think it's great. The colors look awesome. I love the pink and the purple hues. I think it's a really good job as far as that goes. So great image, and hopefully that helps out. Let's go on to our next one. We have the Family Farm Pick. This is by Treen Media. He mentions that this was cropped to an 8x10, balanced for skin tones. Let's see, did some vignetting, dodging, slight burn. And the light setup was simple. He brought his flashes, but they weren't practical for the small straw. He used a halogen work light setup for Rembrandt. Set the reflector on the camera left. Shadows were a bit stronger. They wanted to set up a second halogen as a hair light. Okay, so let's take a look at the image. By the way, write in a little description, guys. It helps so much in knowing what your experience level is and how to critique your images based on how you shot it, because now I know that Trine Media he's not new to photography. He knows some lighting setups and he knows these things, and I'm going to critique it from that standpoint, as opposed to someone that's completely new. You don't focus on, you kind of go for the more big things to fix first and then work to all the small details. Right now, let's talk about some small details. Now, at first you mentioned that you were shooting Rembrandt lighting. I'm going to show you guys Rembrandt lighting because it's a little bit different from what you have here. So Rembrandt lighting is basically shown by this highlight edge that Rembrandt, he'd often paint into his images. And you can see that right here, where you have this highlight right below the right eye, and then you basically have the right side of the face that's in a deep shadow, but not black. You can see examples of Rembrandt lighting from this. Let's actually click back to Google Images. So here we go. You can see tons of different examples. The shadow side of the face is in the shadows, but it's not black, okay? If it is, then it's going to create a really, really dramatic portrait, and you might not be going for that dark of a look. Even look at this image of President Bush. So you can see that highlight right underneath the eye, and then you can see the right side of his face is actually falling into a really deep shadow, and it creates a much more dramatic look than, say, this model right here, whose right side is basically filled. Either way, we have that kind of look. Now, Rembrandt lighting is very difficult to pull off with more than one subject. And the reason being is that each one of these subjects is going to be a different position away from that light source. So if our light source is on the right side, then the person that's on the left is going to be very much more in the shadow side, especially on the left side of their face. It's going to be much more dramatic than the person that's on the right side. And that all depends on where the lighting is placed, whether it's forward, whether it's backward. But bottom line is it becomes very difficult to do that setup. The lighting that you have here is actually not really Rembrandt. Over here we have close to it, but like you said, you have more of a cross lighting setup where it looks like you just have basically a left light and a right light, and it's essentially just creating it'll almost have a similar look to basically just shooting a direct light right at your subjects, but it'll be a little bit nicer. So we can see a little bit of shadow here. You can see a little bit of shadows casting from the main light. It looks like either this left light or there's a fill on the left side that's filling the rest of the faces, so that you don't really get that kind of Rembrandt effect. But that's totally fine. I think it's shot fine just the way it is. The one thing that I would do though is add some modifiers onto that front light. Okay, so what you have here is a very hard light that's being cast, and you can see that by the shadows that are being created basically. There's a few distracting shadows in this image. I'm going to point them out to you. So right here on Dad's shoulder, we're casting a shadow right onto Son's face. From Son's head and Dad's head, we basically get the shadow right here onto the middle of the image. And this is really the problematic shadow right here. It almost looks like this pitch black area where it almost looks like a ghost that's sitting in the background, kind of giving your family a hug. And maybe it's the family ghost, I don't know. But it kind of is a distracting point because it's a very high point of contrast in the center of the image. And so that draws a lot of attention. Next, we have baby's face cast on the mom's shoulder right here. That's not too bad, but again, if we used a light modifier, a larger modifier on that front light to really soften it up a bit, pull the light in close, we'll get really nice soft shadows, and it's not going to be distracting. They're not going to be high areas of contrast in the image. Overall, as far as the pose, I think you did a really good job with the family. I like the pose, mom on the left, dad on the right, kids kind of in the center. The expressions on mom and dad, mom is great, dad is okay. The kids is somewhere I try and work a little bit. Now, I know how tough it is shooting kids. Shooting kids is impossible. You can never get them to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. So I know how difficult that is, but it's one thing that's kind of, it could be better in this shot. Last thing, as far as the overall crop, I like that you have kind of this farm background. It really fits. It suits their personalities very well. The only thing is that they're holding hands across the center, and that's been cropped out. I don't know if you cropped this in post or if it was cropped in camera. But as you know, as most of you should know, is that cropping rules, you never crop at joints. And so we're cropping right across their hands, which is kind of distracting. And also, we lose a lot from the image because we don't see them holding hands. So don't crop at joints, don't crop at the hand, at the wrist, at the elbow, at the shoulder, and so forth. We always want to crop in between. If you can fix that in post-production. If not, the next time kind of leave their hands in. Either go a little bit wider or just pull the top of the frame down. Last thing, we do have this post right here that's jutting right out of his head, and I'd say try to compose it in a way where you don't have these background objects that are sticking right up out of people's heads like that. So it'll kind of look almost like the object is a part of the person and that there's just a beam sticking out of their head. But that's just another kind of critique for this shot. As far as post-production goes, I think you did a nice job. It has a very nice warm tone to it. I think stylistically, my preference is to go a little bit cooler, but again, this is really more of a subjective thing. I like a little bit cooler looking images. This one works totally fine as well. It's not overly warm. It works just as well. So that's just a stylistic standpoint of difference. But anyway, I hope this helped you out, Trine Media, and that's it for this session of critiquing. We'll see you guys on the forum and in the next constructive critique video.